And most successful companies share one thing: they develop their people. The Success Launch Point makes it simple with on-demand courses, live coaching, and a thriving professional community. Your team will gain confidence, sharpen skills, and deliver more value, while staying loyal to the company that invests in them. To take your workforce to the next level, check out modernobserver.com/launchpoint.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I'm Bill Carell. I'm here with my really good friend, Jan Jeremias, and I'm cracking her up, which makes my heart feel really, really good. So every week, I think it's lovely to hear you chuckle. I really do. Every week we get together and we have a conversation. We really don't know where it's going to go. I think the general map is in the area of empowerment. And it's very free form. And at the same time, we get an opportunity to look into places that we don't normally go in conversation. And from that standpoint, hopefully we're presenting some value to you, our listeners. And I think, from my standpoint, if I get an emotional reaction to something while we're having our chat, I know that it's probably landing out there with you folks as well. So I think with that said, hi, Jan. How are you?
I'm okay, Bill. How are you?
I'm really okay. I can tell you, we've been friends for a long time, and I can tell you that sometimes life really does seem bigger than we are, and the things that have to get done are not well defined, but it does seem insurmountable sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, I do.
So with that in mind, I've been working on something over the last week or so to just get my thinking straight. And the feelings in my body are starting to line up with my thinking after all this time, as opposed to resisting and fighting it. It's like people who are always optimistic, and I would place myself on that side of the curve, that I'm very rarely, down in the mouth or pessimistic. I like to think that I'm enlightened enough to be realistic about what's really wrong, And the fact of the matter is no, it's still a thought that I have that's not reality. It hasn't happened yet. So how can it be realistic? So my thinking is along the lines of, and this is something that I've used to coach people for a lot of years. When you have a big thing that has to get done, concentrate on freeing yourself up to really concentrate on that and to focus, so that the other things that are going on, you can't do two things at one time, in other words. So you're really, really on purpose about making something happen. And a little brief story, back when I used to pitch in high school and junior high school, and since I was 8 years old, there were a couple of times where I got really into a bind, and I really had to focus on making the ball land in the strike zone for 3 pitches in a row and take a chance and risk that whoever was at the plate was going to pick out a meatball and knock it over the fence. And again, the feeling in my stomach, is about literally having that butterfly sensation, if you will. And then when I was in high school and I was in musicals and performing publicly and that sort of thing, director once told me, he said, don't you ever get rid of those butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
That's the spice of life. He said, that's why you get out of bed every morning. Just teach those butterflies how to fly in formation and you'll be okay.
I got
So I think with that in mind, what I'm really saying is that the question at the forefront is, can I have what's going on or not going on just be the way that it is? And then allow myself to concentrate on my inner response to it. And through, that kind of work, teach myself how to calm and teach myself how to, be okay. And as my grandson used to say when he was 3, not freak out.
And not freak out, right? Well, on Friday, Mary Jane and I gave a talk on acceptance.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of what you were saying, it reminded me of that conversation of like how much we resist what's happening and how much time we spend in the aspect of we wish it wasn't happening that way, or why is it happening that way? And I love it. I read a wonderful article by Tara Brach, the meditation teacher, and she talks about holding space for that. Like it's okay to feel like you wish it wasn't happening,
Yeah.
but also to allow it to be like but then to accept it because, and I'm reminded of different things in the past few weeks of like, of a friend whose sister's very ill.
Right.
And does she wish that she wasn't ill and she wasn't at this stage? Absolutely. But she has to accept it too, because, there's basically no choice. And so I think I loved what she shared because she talks about holding both. And I think in my very analytical brain that tends to compartmentalize things a lot, I
Right.
always think of having those feelings of like, I wish this wasn't happening as being bad, quote unquote, or I shouldn't be having those types of feelings. Is contrary to the way I've been taught. I've been taught and trained to think, okay, you're supposed to accept this, you know, especially in my yoga background. You're supposed to be present, you're supposed to accept it. But denying that other stuff is there isn't helpful either.
Yeah.
And so is being able, she talks about holding that aspect of yourself with compassion and understanding of like allowing yourself to think, oh my, this is happening, but it's really rotten. Like, even if I accept it, it's not good,
Right.
but I got to accept it. And I think that I've been playing and thinking about that as we prepared for like last week, because I've been saying to myself, it was kind of liberating to know, like, and to think that it's okay that I'm not like very upset that whatever's happening is happening. Like, that's okay. And then she talks about the fact that you have to allow both. You have to accept, mindfully accept, clearly accept. And you
Yeah.
have to allow space for the part of yourself which wishes it wasn't happening. And that's really the only way to move forward. And then your
Yeah.
question is, what's the next best step I can make?
I like it. I like it a lot. And I'll tell you, there's a couple of things that or offshoots of that thought, if you will. The first one being your feeling and your thoughts are neither good nor bad. They're just your feelings or your thoughts. It's what we're assigning as a potential outcome that makes those thoughts disempowering. So, for example, while you were thinking that a thought was bad, I'm wondering, for me, sometimes it's that I'm resisting that the thought is there at all because I feel like, I should be at this point in my life like a black belt in terms of being able to, calm myself and all those kinds of things. Um, so the whole notion of allowing it to be, I just keep coming back to this thing that makes me laugh. Okay. In the old days when we were talking about if life's not going the way you want to, you got to be like the rider on the back of the horse. And so what's the rider on the back of the horse do? Before it wants to turn the horse, what do they have to do? They got to ride the horse the direction the horse is going, you know? Not resist it, not try to fight, just kind of, we call it acceptance and surrendering, all those different words, whatever it is for you. But when you do that, it's almost comical that you are fighting against something that can't be beaten. And conversational things are the worst. There is no way to structurally change a conversation. more conversation can make it disappear. But once something is said, it's out there. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And there are particular kinds of conversations that no matter how enlightened you are or how much, you know, you've gotten over it, sometimes people just get triggered, by going back to that same place where things didn't work out so well sometime in the past. So the other offshoot is this. If you can reduce something down to riding the horse, the direction it's going, then you can get curious about, well, what direction is it going? And start analyzing, what's actually happening as opposed to your, inside story about what's happening, right?
Mhm.
Like somebody said X, and that means all these other things, in your subconscious that it's not really letting you in on right at the moment. You're just feeling upset or sick to your stomach or, knots in your stomach, whatever it is, or you're happy, but you don't know exactly why. You can't put your finger on it. So a lot of times I think, that if you have this little pause, what I'm working on this week. So I don't know if I'm there yet, but the long and the short of it is that the pause is what allows us to step back into being curious
Mhm.
and not why, but what is it? Let's see if we can just put a little bit of an understanding if it's growing in size in all directions or if it's in a particular area that working on that, doing some work in that area will help you overcome. It's like, if you're trying to develop your abs, you don't lift weights and do arm curls, that's the long way to get your abs in shape. And the same thing mentally is that if you're in a conversation with yourself where you're trying to change the content of the conversation, it's resistance. And we know the more that you resist something, the more it persists.
Well,
Those, yeah,
that's what I was, because I think about how much I resisted or how much I really compartmentalized or labeled those feelings or thoughts as, you know, wrong. And one is how energetically draining it is. And
yeah,
eventually it erupts because you can't contain it all the time.
yeah,
And how just allowing it to be there, if it's in the allowance, to me, it's just like, it's like riding a horse, if riding the waves, if you ride the wave of it and you can actually not run away from it,
yeah,
then eventually it softens. Like there is a softening to it that happens. Doesn't feel like that when you're going through it. I'm the first to vouch for that. Not necessarily. It can, but not always. When you're in the panic, it still feels like panic and it still doesn't feel great, but
yeah.
you know.
You remember when we were kids doing the Chinese fire drill? And what that is for you at home, I haven't heard of it before. You got a carload full of high school kids, and at a stoplight, everybody opens all the doors and they get out of the car and they run around in circles and then they get back in randomly, not in the same place where they were before. And then you laugh hysterically for the next 15 or 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
our thoughts sometimes are exactly like that. There's no organization to it at all. It's just blah.
Well, and also I think our emotions are like that because like you said, we get triggered. And I think that, most of the time it's not the exact circumstance of what happens.
Right.
It's the memory or the emotional memory of whatever that was. And,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, someone walking out on you is the same as every single friend who's ever left or, it's not that just that one person, it's the conglomerate of every person or every
Yeah.
circumstance that's been similar in your life that all of a sudden kind of comes back to you.
I think the earlier similar in psychology, that I studied when I was in college was, the nature of Freud's work, where he was always, tell me about your childhood, right? Like the root of all evil was your first interaction with your mother. And if you could get all the way back there before you had words and language and couldn't express what you were feeling, that maybe that would release something. But what I particularly love about what you're saying is there's a lot of ways for us to language this. And if you're in a situation where you don't really like the sensation that you're having, if you just will sit quietly, breathe, it will pass. Try that, from time to time when things aren't going as you want. The panic that we were talking about, and that relating to the Chinese fire drill, which ultimately is fun, sometimes you can get to the point where you can laugh at the fact you were panicking. And then especially later on when it turns out to be over nothing, my favorite quote, like I said, I don't remember if it was Sam Clemens or if it was, Will Rogers. He said, but I've experienced many terrible things in my life, a few of which actually happened.
Well, and the fact that we really, I think that sometimes that can happen. We can laugh. We can
Right.
realize how silly we're being, or that it's not the same, or here I am again. Like,
Right.
it's like, oh my gosh, here I am again. And it almost becomes humorous. And the fact that you're like, oh my gosh, here I am telling myself that same story again, or here I am saying those exact same words in my head. And, and you're like, and then it almost to me is like, my next thing is like, really? You're here again? Like, really?
Yeah. Didn't we dispatch you a while ago?
I know, exactly. Exactly. Aren't you over this already? Um, you know, that's always a big one, depending on, especially in the grief world or whatever, and loss and grief, because you go through something and then all of a sudden, something happens, an anniversary or whatever, and you're down a hole for a day or 2 days, and you're like, didn't I deal with this already? Like, didn't I go through this already? That all of a sudden it's resurfacing.
Right. Right. I had one of those days yesterday. I got out of bed, and last week was really mixed. It was a lot of up conversations and quite a few failures. Uh, but I got up yesterday morning and new day, gonna put on my best hat here and do things really, really well today. Treat myself well, get some exercise in, eat well, all that good stuff. Now, I wasn't buying it. So I think probably around noon or so, I happened to just open up something and it said November 22nd. And I said, oh my God, November 22nd. This is the anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination. And that had a profound effect on me as a child. It's something that I take a moment, and I do something every year to kind of celebrate the memory of that, in my opinion, a really, really great man. He was a statesman as well as a leader. As far as I was concerned, he was one of the greatest inspiring individuals to me. He actually formed in the 1960s the President's Council on Physical Fitness. Those of us that were there recall that. And so we actually had planned field days where, the money was coming from Congress. They had allocated funds to do this in a big way so that all of the kids in the area could get together and compete. And we would do running, and we'd do sit-ups and pull-ups and all that kind of stuff. So I've got great memories around that. But the other part of it is he used really great words, like vigor. I never heard anybody say that word before I heard it out of his mouth. But after I got into physical shape, in my early years, and I became a, pretty good athlete, the seed was planted there by him. So all that comes back up for me. And then I get a chance to kind of relive over the years where I was and what I was doing on this day. Who was with me? What were we doing? What did we do to pause for a moment and just kind of give thanks for what we have because of what he did and how he left the earth. So yesterday I just stopped everything I was doing. I opened up Chat GPT, and I gave it instructions and prompts, to make me a meme, commemorating Jack Kennedy's passing. And the first one came and it was black and white. It wasn't really pretty, but it did say, John F. Kennedy, rest in peace. And then his birthday to 1963. And then I said, no, let's do it in color. And gave me one in color. Didn't look like quite like him. And I said, well, now let's concentrate on get real detail and get his face right. Brought it back to me. So instead of smiling like it was in the first one, came back and Jack was frowning. So I said, okay, so we're almost there. The color looks great. The definition of the face looks great. Keep all of that. But let's do this. Let's put him in an open collared shirt with the ocean behind him and with the air blowing through his hair. Make it a little bit windy and that there's a little bit of tousling going on with his hair, and make him smile, please. So it came back. I was very happy with what the result was, and I posted it on Facebook to share it with friends. But all in, it probably took me 15 minutes to do that. But I got to intentionally upgrade and design, which is what you and I can do in our lives. We can have a thought and we can do something, and then we can kind of take a look and see what happened. And each time it comes out, you can take another look and say, was that what I was intending? Is that what I want? No, it's not. Let's do it one more time. So this for me is cathartic in terms of, the metaphor is that life is all about asking for what you want and not getting exactly it, but do you walk away and accept it the way that it is in most cases? Or do you stand in there and keep asking questions and keep tweaking it until you do get exactly what you want?
Yeah, I went to an interesting thing yesterday, on, in the conversation, I don't know if the woman brought it up, but in the conversation around what she was saying, somebody said that, part of what we need is to align our values with what we want. And I thought about that a long time. And the problem with most people is that a lot of times what they've designed does not align with their values. And therefore, to me, the likelihood of success and buy-in, like when you talk about like whether you think it's believable, like you said, you were going to get up and have a great day, and it's like your brain is like, "I'm sorry, you're giving me a lot of BS here," like your brain's BS meter's going off,
Yeah.
And I think we know that right away when we believe something we're saying to ourselves and whether we don't. And so, but I really thought about that, about aligning your values, whatever they are. And there's like so many different things out there about determining what your values are. And even though I think most people do, even if they're not clear on them, I think they're there. They just have to kind of pull them out. But
Right.
I thought to myself, like, that is so true. Like, it's really, because I think that otherwise it's not, there's like a lack of genuineness there. There's, I think then also, I think there's a lack of joy there because it doesn't align. And so maybe you have that success, but I don't know how much happiness it really brings you or joy it brings you, because I think it has to align with who you are. And so when you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, we want to design the life we want. And the best life is the one that aligns with what you think is important.
Yeah. And you're pointing to something that fundamentally every once in a while I lose touch with.
I think we all do.
Yeah. And from that standpoint, it's helpful for me to look around and, as opposed to kind of like an indiscriminate accusation of the world not giving me what I want or not giving me the attention I think I deserve, or, kind of thinking at some point, is there a quid pro quo where what you put out into the universe actually does come back so you can see it?
I guess.
Not like a future promise to be cashed someday in the future, but like, hey, I could use that promise now. Thank you.
Exactly.
So, with that in mind, I kind of realign myself and always and everywhere, I recognize those moments when I'm ever having thoughts about someone else and what they may have done wrong, or that kind of a thing. That doesn't work for me. I don't get over that. What I do have a way of, my ticket out of purgatory is to say, how is this something that I can be responsible for? And what's my true commitment here? What is my life for? And I come back to really like three underlying statements for everything. Number one is I can have anything in life that I want, provided I help all my friends have what they want first. I've lived that for a very long time. And I'm also at an age where, my wife and I have been a really good team together. I have to give her credit for everything that works, in our relationship and in our marriage, which is coming up on 50 years in June. But all of that said, I am who I am because of her. Okay. The good stuff. The bad stuff is me. But the good stuff is all her, and her what she reminds me of that's important. And so I think with that in mind, I've got a huge family that I love to death. And it's funny, I really do believe that there's such a thing as biorhythm cycles, because it just seems like there are so many people that I know, and so many families and loved ones that are in a down cycle where their energy is low, where they're facing unusual challenges, if you will. In many cases, what they've done is they've taken on things in life that they thought were going to be kind of a timeout for them, and it ain't working out that way. It's working out like it's twice as much work with half the amount of satisfaction and joy, as you were saying. And when you get to a point where I'm looking around my long list of friends, and what's really kind of cool is all of them except for one or two, and I happen to just be calling everybody that I know and tell the phone a friend. Sometimes you've got to phone a friend until you find one where you can actually have a good conversation. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah, of course, because I think that, we call someone and they, not being critical and not being judgmental, but everybody
Right.
has whatever they're going through going on.
Right.
And so all of a sudden you call and you're looking for something. Maybe it's comfort, support, someone to listen, and they're not necessarily in the headspace to, not in a negative way, but they're not at that time in the headspace nor the time space to be able to do that for you. And I think I agree with you. Like, it's like sometimes when you go out and you're kind to people in the world, you kind of feel like, okay, I go out of my way for people. I really wish that somebody would do the same for me,
Yes.
every now and then. Um, and I think that's part of it. I think I look at some of what you said, and I think to myself now, I've been reflecting on, like I said, I've been working a lot on my values. And so my top value, like, I really decided is kindness and compassion. That's like my top value. And I think I'm pretty good at directing it outward. I think I'm a pretty kind and compassionate person in the world. I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't, I basically think everybody in the world is good. Like, I'm not the type of person that goes around thinking the world, like everybody in the world is like, I really basically think that people are decent and good
Yep.
and everything. I have a very hard time directing it inward, of giving myself those same considerations. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, I'm like, okay, if my top value is kind and compassionate, shouldn't that be directed to me too? Like, all of a sudden that question came to mind. I was like, oh, you would think it should. But it doesn't necessarily, um, happen. And so I've been just sitting with that for a while. It's like that kind of like, it's almost like two standards. Like I hold myself to one standard, and then everybody else I hold to this different standard. And as you were speaking, I think that we all go through that where, you know, we feel like, I don't know, y- and we know it's not all about us, but we're kind of like, I need help now. or I need someone to talk to,
Absolutely.
you know, would be nice if we
Uh,
could.
Yeah. So my first one, as I said, that's what it is. And thank you for helping me develop and flesh that out, because whatever is there is always up for upgrading, if you will, for adding to make it look more like the picture I've got in mind. And I do that by getting other people's ideas, not just hitting a dead end with what I think. I think the second one is that I'm a really committed individual to be in a position where I can provide for other people, family especially, but definitely, really good friends. And I've done that since I was probably 8 years old, 6 or 7 years old. It's just something I did because I was the oldest. And so that's it there too. And my third one is something I've worked on, and on the continuum of, are you good at it or do you stink? I'm probably closer to the you stink thing, but it's my commitment to be a better and better listener, to allow people to kind of get into and flesh out what they haven't got language for when they first bring something to the table. In a lot of cases, what I find is the more that I can just stand in there, especially in uncomfortable circumstances and conversations. You and I know we have friends and loved ones going through some stuff that, and you're the same way in that regards. And I know you're going to be spending time with folks that we both know and love, and helping them through whatever it is that they need. But at the same point, I find myself every once in a while predicting where a conversation is going to go, and really shutting down and losing sight of my commitment, which is, words are never going to change my life. My action in response to the words is what is going to change my life. So if I remember that, I have a lot of compassion for myself to be a listener in training, if you will. And at the same time, kind of recognizing that all three of these things have to do with being a flawed human being, and actually being prone to making probably more mistakes than having things work out in the way that I intend. But what I've always found is that in any conversation that gets uncomfortable, the courage on my part and whoever it is I'm speaking with, to stand in there and keep going until there's at least a point where we don't agree. However, we're still friends and loved ones and all that sort of thing. But I find a lot of people are just not there right now. There's been like so much going on, and people's lives have been tipped upside down. And I don't know. I don't know what you're seeing, but especially since COVID, that people have become more isolated and probably less open and less seeking that type of a relationship these days. I don't know. What are you saying?
I think to some extent you're definitely right. I think that people have a lot of, a lot of angst, a lot of fear. I think I think people are on information overload. I just feel like there's so much information coming at people all the time,
Right.
that I think that people don't have any downtime, so there's no space. And and we're very used to, and that stuff is very distracting. Like, we're very good at distracting ourselves, and we have so many ways to do it now.
Yeah.
You can binge watch whatever you want for ever many hours a day. You can game on your phone, or play solitaire or whatever games for hours. You can, there's so many different ways to sort of basically numb yourself, let alone the more chemical type, that's chemical in the fact of what it's doing to your brain, but let alone like alcohol, drugs, like all those other things which have been around for a while. This is sort of like an added element to it. And people don't know how to have downtime anymore. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. People don't know how to have downtime and have time when there is nothing. Like we were talking about the benefits of being bored the other day, of
Yeah.
boredom, and people don't know how to be bored.
Right.
And I think in that space when you're constantly, I mean, I know that that's sometimes though, not around having conversations with other people, but I know that sometimes when I feel that sort of information overload kind of thing, first of all, I feel like my decision making is off, like it's delayed because I've just so much going on up there. It's very
Yeah.
hard for me to sort it out. And I get that with people I talk to, like I'm kind of like, what's stopping you kind of thing, or what's preventing you from taking the next step or whatever it is. And I think that people have just so much that they're handling between the information and then families and then, if they are, the world, I just think that there's so much now.
I agree with you. And I think all of us have been recently bitten by something that came out of that sector known as what you don't know, you don't know, It's almost never, that we're stopping because of something that's knowable. Our concern is that there's something that's unknowable where we are right now. And if we do the wrong thing, we make the commitment, we do the choice, especially if we're dealing with a relationship. It's the kind of thing that once you risk in that area, you've got to be willing to have your heart dashed on a rock, And it's not just one time. It's like there's an opportunity to get knocked to your knees emotionally almost every single day, it seems.
I was reading I read and I think I wrote eventually this beautiful blog or essay on friendship one day. And
Yeah.
and it was, in it, I think with every friendship, first of all, we have to remember that the people across of us are human beings and therefore they are, you said flawed, but they are human beings. I mean, not necessarily flawed, but they're human. And there has to be some element of forgiveness in there. Otherwise, the friendship never lasts, because there's going to be misunderstandings. There's going to be the whole idea of, oh, I think they should understand me by now. There's going to be all these different things that come in when you have a relationship with somebody. And I think that there has to be some sort of element of forgiveness. If I have certain close friends, really good friends, that if I stopped being their friend because they didn't call me back, the friendship would have ended like 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. And not to say they don't say they're sorry, but it's okay because I realize that we all get busy. And there are points I'm sure they call me where I don't call back, because I have a lot going on. And I think there has to be a little bit of like a dance that happens because otherwise no relationship lasts.
Yeah, it's true. And you put a really nice sentence together that describes one of my reach outs this week. Friend I've known for 25 years. I needed to talk to him about something that I consider to be pretty important. So I called him on Monday, twice, no answer. Okay, that's cool. I'll hear back from him. Didn't hear back from him. Called him on Tuesday, twice, no answer. What's going on around here? So Wednesday, I called him, he picked up, and I said, "Hey, bud, where are you?" He says, "Well, I'm out to lunch with a bunch of people." I said, "Well, do you want to go, hang out with them?" He says, "No, I missed your other calls." So I talked to him for 25 minutes while other people were doing what they were doing. And he just kept asking me questions. And so I had all that time to have mischief running around inside my head. And what was he didn't answer the phone. That's all that happened. He just didn't answer the phone, which kind of left me in an area where, the first couple times I didn't think anything of it. And we've, over the years, I hear back from him sooner or later. And then he told me, he's getting ready to, go visit his son, and then pick up his daughter and then drive back for Thanksgiving. And No, there was nothing missing. It was a great conversation and really nothing to understand at that point. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. But you also like eventually you got him and he like explained what was happening. And I agree with you. Sometimes, like we always say like the dialogue or the story or the mischief that was going on in our heads
Right.
was, was it was all on our side. It had really nothing to do with him. I mean, he was fine. He was just busy.
Right.
And, and in our heads, we're like, oh my gosh, like, is he upset with me? Did I do something? Did something happen? Like all the stories we create around whatever's happening. And, um, and I think we all do it. We have circumstances where, sometimes, my mother always says no news is good news. And I used to hate that phrase, but in some ways I do understand it.
Yeah.
In some circumstances, you can't say no news is good news any day nowadays. Like, it used to be a doctor would call you back after a test result.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, if you don't hear from the doctor, call them because the likelihood that they're going to call you is very low. So, like, call them to make sure. But other circumstances, I mean, I think people just do. They're working, they have families, whatever's going on with them, you know, and I just think sometimes it's, and I think that it gets even more complicated. Like you said, he's a good friend. I think it gets even more complicated sometimes if it's like a family member or friend who you feel really should call you back.
Yes.
Even if it's just to say, I'm really busy right now, I can't talk to you, and so, but they should call you back or acknowledge, text you and say, I can't talk right now. Like, whatever, that basically not the house is physically on fire, but I'm putting out fires and I'll call you back.
So yes, and I love that you're saying it just that way because here's the thing: we all know the technology of distinguishing what happened from what your story is, right? And if you can do that, then it's easy for you to just kind of let it go as a story and then on to the next thing and see what happens until you amp up the significance of what's going on in the context of why do you need to speak to each other? What's missing if you don't speak to each other? Is there a deadline? Did you make a promise to somebody that you would manage that something would happen by a particular time, and you actually need to have them talk to you in order to complete your promise, or all that. But the significance kind of ramps up. And I find it with loved ones that are in poor health, as they get closer to their um, expiration date, as my little sister used to call it, that the need to just be reassured by just breathing into the receiver and let me know you're there. But personally, I've had periods where I hugged somebody goodbye on a Friday and then found out they passed on Sunday morning. And I think the hard part of that is that we all say, I wish I'd had one more chance to have conversation with them. And then the task at hand is, if it's, I mean, that's DEFCON 5 in terms of the storytelling, right? Um, so I think really what I'm trying to say here is that the more significance is attached to it, the more you got to rely on who you are, what you stand for in the world. Like you said, going back and reassessing your values and coming from there. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of compassion with yourself for having feelings that, might be a little needy or a little attached and, having some compassion for that. Like, yeah, that's appropriate. Or whether it's appropriate or not, it's forgivable.
It's forgivable and it's appropriate if you're having them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's appropriate in the fact that, whatever, in the fact that even if you can't figure out why you're reacting in a particular way, it's like
Right.
hearing something or seeing something or someone says something or something circumstance and you're like, I'm having a very amplified reaction to this
Yeah.
and I'm not quite sure why. It's like it's doing that to me. And sometimes we can decipher why and sometimes we have no clue.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things you said about, saying goodbye, and I was just talking to a friend of mine about that. And she was talking about her mother and the fact that when she left the hospital that day, she kind of knew it was going to be the last time. And I was saying that when I left my father for the last time, I was hoping it wasn't going to be the last time I saw him and I hugged him. But deep down, I knew it was it was going to be the last time I saw him. And I think that, not that I could have changed anything else, nor would I have changed anything. Well, I did have I thought to myself, maybe I should have gone back down to see him. And my aunt saying to me, it was good you weren't here. It was really good you weren't here. But I think part of me wasn't the conversation, because at that point it wasn't my father wasn't conversing that much. It was the hug. I wished I had the opportunity to give him another hug.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. That's what and that's what I think about. Even in my mind, I can feel it, if I envision it, I can feel what it was like. And I just, keeps me, reminds me, it makes me smile. But yeah, it wasn't the at that point, it's not the conversation necessarily. It's their presence.
Yeah. So along those lines, in terms of people making unreasonable requests of me, for example, my sister, lawyer, Laura, God bless her. So she was a pretty heavy smoker through the early years, and then went to AA meetings where they smoked all the time for 20, 25 years. So she got lung cancer and COPD, and it was a long, slow decline for her. And finally, she for several times within a year, she would collapse. Her pulse ox would go down to in the low 80s. And so they'd have to rush her to the emergency room. And finally, she sat up in her bed and she FaceTimed me from where she was. And she said, "This is it, brother." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I'm done. I'm going home. I'm going into hospice, and I'm going to stop all of my life-saving medications, and we're just going to see what happens." And I said, "Well, what can I do for you?" She's in Denver. I was in Connecticut. And she said, "You can come here and hold my hand." And I said, "I will be there as soon as I possibly can." So I dropped everything. I got to the airport the next day, and I ended up not being able to get on a flight until the following day, but I was in Denver by noontime from Sunday to Tuesday. And when I got there, I just sat next to her and I held her hand. And I said, "I'm here. What do you need?" And she said, "You see that guy over there we've been living with for almost 20 years? I said, "Yeah, I see him. We're good friends." And she said, "I want to marry him." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Can you make that happen for me? He just can't do it on his own, for whatever reason." I said, "I'll make that happen for you." And I said, "You sure you want to marry that bum? I mean, you hardly know him." And we both laughed. And she said, "Yep, I want to marry him." And I said, "Let me see what I can do." So I said, "Butch, get your stuff. We're getting in the car. We're going to the county courthouse." It took us about 4.5 hours. We had to go in. There were some things that he had to get cleaned up and an old fine he had to pay in order to get his marriage license. It was, just this stuff that people kind of let accumulate over the years. We walked out of there with a marriage license for him. And went back to the house, and he said, "Bill," he said, "I want you as my best man." And I said, my pleasure. And I didn't end up being his best man, but we had the ceremony in the living room where her hospital bed was. And it was a celebration. I mean, it was a real high point of joy. And this was 3 days, and now the rest of the family, brothers, sisters, starting to show up, and friends of the family and what have you. And I'd been there for that whole period of time. And so that Thursday night, I said, honey, I'm going back to Connecticut. You got a lot of folks around you here right now. She looked at me and she said, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you got me married. And I said, we aim to please, miss. We both laughed. And I said, I'm heading home. You want me to say anything to Janet? And she said, yep, you tell her. I only regret that I did not get to hug her one last time. Yeah. So kind of a personal share, I know, but you know what? I have tears when I haven't got the language or the words to express what's going on in the inside of me. So thank you all for letting me tell my little story. That's one of the high points of my life. Oh, by the way, ask me what I wouldn't do for a friend. Not much.
That's right. I feel the same way. Yeah.
You do. You live it. No doubt about it.
And it's interesting because I feel like, first of all, thank you for that beautiful story, because that is a beautiful, beautiful story. And, and I think it on such a deep level, on so many levels, it's beautiful on the, practical kind of thing. But also, like you said, it was a celebration. It was such a beautiful thing. And what a gift to be able to give her at the end. Like, I mean, of all the things that in the end that she wanted, that was it. And, and the fact that you were able to do that for her was really beautiful. Yeah, there's, so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're an empath. I know you really are feeling that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's, I think there are certain things that, whether it be, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's you're there for someone, you're there for an animal, you're there for, that you're just there.
Yeah.
Because presence is presence. It's like you're there. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she said to me, does your mother FaceTime, like do video calls? And I said, not so much. She's not that tech savvy that she's really good at that. If somebody's there with her, she'll get on, but she doesn't necessarily do it on her own. I mean, I talk to her every day, but I don't really need to see her. I mean, necessarily. I think hearing her voice is, the other thing. And since my mother, thank God, is communicative, that's not a problem. But I think that it's so interesting to me that, like, there are people in your life that you can never speak to enough. That, like I speak to my mom twice a day, almost every day.
Good for you.
And, and it could be just a few seconds. If I'm busy or she's on her way out or she can't talk or whatever, but it just, it doesn't have to be long.
That's it. It's when we were kids, we used to play this game called Fresher. So there's a goal and there's somebody guarding the goal. And the objective is for, 8 or 10 kids to all run around in circles and stay away from the person who's the goalie. And the goalie's job is to go and whoever touches the goal last is fresher, right? So the first person touches it and says fresh and then runs away. Second person touches it, fresher. Now, if they touch you, you're out. Okay. They become each person who's the last person to touch the goal. So through life, how you refill your cup and how you become fresher as an adult is to go to that place where you have an emotional exchange with somebody that you really care about. And again, you get to recreate that moment. You talk to your mom twice a day, but you don't just talk to your mom. You call her, you have an exchange of emotion. She listens to you, you listen to her. Sometimes it's probably a few minutes, sometimes it's a half hour. I don't know. That's kind of what happens when people start talking to each other. You never know how long it's going to go. But I think what you're modeling is something I would recommend to all people. Do that with the people you most care about. You know, how we end our broadcast every week is we tell you to call somebody that you care about and let them know your world works because they're in it. And I like your idea of the ones that are really important to you. Don't put a limit on how many times you call them. You know, just keep going back and exchanging that great emotion.
Absolutely. And, and sometimes, she'll laugh and she'll say to me, I'm sure you're tired of me, I'm sure you're tired of me complaining, kind of thing. But I don't get tired of it. I really
No.
don't. And I really don't. And most of the time it's stuff that she's not complaining about, stuff like I understand why she's complaining, you know, so it's not like, just, but it always makes me smile. And she says it.
Well, the other thing too is that everybody, I don't care how close you are, no matter who you love, there are some pet peeves that you have about people's behaviors. Everything is great except for that one thing. And the world shifts after they're gone. You would give anything to have them come back and do it one more time, you know?
My grandmother used to say, you'd call her and I'd say to her, I called her, I'd say, Gram, how you doing? She used to say, I'm really good except for this darn knee. Every conversation, it's always so funny.
It's funny. Grandmothers are like that.
Yep.
When Janet and I went out to Detroit the first time after we were married, we took a trip out there to spend a week. And the first time I saw my grandmother in, I don't know, 7-8 years. And she comes in and she's coming back from the dentist. And I said, hey, how you doing, Grandma? And she's, well, they tried to kill me, but they didn't do it. And I said, what? And she said, well, the dentist, and oh my goodness. So I listened to all that for a few minutes. It was never a question about me that came back. It was always telling me the big story of the moment.
The big story of the moment. No, there's something very treasured about those relationships that you have with other, those people. And I love the fact that you agreed. I think that there are people in your life that even we always say, just let them know. I mean, there are people I check in with and text with every day,
Yeah.
and some of them I haven't been friends with for that long, but there's something about the relationship and the connection that, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, I'm like that with Mary Jane. And every now and then, we both get busy and she'll be like, you okay? I haven't heard from you all day. you know, and I'll be like, I'm okay. Kind of thing. Same thing happens with her, but that's where, like I said, where the forgiveness comes in, or just realizing that, life, life, life keeps on lifing.
It does. And we keep on humaning.
It's right.
As our friend Ken used to say, we pretty much suck at that, but we get lots of opportunities to get new practice, don't we?
Oh, yes, we do.
So I don't know if you could hear my clock, but this wonderful clock that my daughter and I bought for my wife for her birthday was 25 years ago. We were down at Disney World and bought it at the German pavilion out in Epcot Center. It hasn't run in this house for about 10 years. I mean, it's just been sitting on the wall over there. I finally decided I'm going to turn the darn thing on. It's got weights. Unfortunately, the weights only last about 16 hours. So I have to remember to shut off, the cuckoo part of it, or the gong part, whatever. And otherwise they're always going to be on the floor when I get up in the morning. So, it just brings me joy to sit here and have that thing go off every half hour. And I look over and I look at Jan and I say, you know what that is? That reminds me of you. We have those little opportunities in our life to bring folks along with us.
Mm-hmm.
And we do it through objects. objects kind of spur us on and remind us of the things and different things. And I really, sometimes good, sometimes not so good, right?
Yeah. I mean, an object can bring back a memory that's kind of a hard or a challenging memory. And then it
Right.
also can bring back a memory or both, where it's like, if the person has passed and then all of a sudden that object is good, but there's also this tinge of sadness that they're not there. I
Right.
mean, I wear a ring that was my grandmother's ring almost every day. Like, I mean, I haven't put on my rings today yet, but usually almost every day. It's this
Right.
greenstone pinky ring that was hers that I wear almost every day. And it reminds me of her. But on the other hand, I mean, obviously she's not here anymore. So there is always this tinge of like, I miss her. You know, she was an amazing woman. But, so there is sometimes the kind of the both that happens.
Right.
And then there are the objects where you're like, oh, you know, I remember so and so they gave me that, or I got that because of, that reminds me of so and so. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think objects,
So,
I think places can do that too. Like my father was a big nature lover. And every
right.
now and then, like I can be outside and I can like look up or I'll just look out and the sunrise is really beautiful. And I'm thinking to myself, Daddy would have loved that. Or that remind or he would have said something. If there's some sort of eclipse or something that's happening, he was always the one that would say, there's eclipse tomorrow.
It's funny. Every time you talk about him, you know what I always recall? How he always pretended to be being lost when you guys went out someplace going home. What a special man.
Oh my God. I actually spoke to my mother. My mother and I were talking about that like a few weeks ago when she was in to visit because we were out together driving on a Sunday. And I said to her, should I pretend to get lost? And she started to laugh, it's like,
Those family inside jokes are something special, aren't they?
yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know what? We did it again.
Hmm. Yes, we
I
did.
cherish I cherish these moments, my friend. I really
Oh,
do.
I cherish you, Bill.
Exactly. I cherish you, Jan. Absolutely. So, any other parting thoughts or any nuggets you want to hand off?
Um, I guess my last thought would be, um, this week is, I'm assuming, this will be out soon, but it is Thanksgiving this week.
Yes.
And I would just take a moment for everybody. And we talk a lot about gratitude, gratefulness, but just have it be an experience. And I read a beautiful article and I'll see if I can find the line. Yeah, it's from Tara Brock, and she said, "Gratitude arises when we are in sacred relationship with life, present, open, and receptive." And there's something about gratitude and appreciation, which I think is, when she talks about gratitude is like, the breath in, generosity is the breath out.
Right.
So that would be what I'd leave everybody with. Just be grateful for something.
It's worth the time spent on it, isn't it?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I love that. And thank you so much, my dear friend. And if I don't talk to you, have a happy Thanksgiving. And I don't need to say anything more. We've already told you to call somebody you love and tell them that, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say, everyone, I'm thankful for you. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to get here and say these things, and hopefully some of it makes a difference for you. So we are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I will say this one more time. Go out into the world, have a ball, and then come back and tell me all about it, please. Bye for now.
Goodbye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Exvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.